she invited us to her Victoria's birthday party that next day at 2 o'clock. And she asked if I had kids, and I said, yeah, I have some kids. And she's like, well, bring them, more the merrier. Victoria will love to have kids around.
But that birthday party never happened. Victoria was murdered the morning she was supposed to have the party.
Victoria Ann Martins was born on August 23, 2006, to her mother, Michelle Martins. Her father's name was Kyle Martinez, but he was never in Victoria's life. And Victoria also had a younger brother who was named Matthew. Michelle had given birth to Victoria at the Presbyterian Hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the mother said that despite her never getting any prenatal care during her pregnancy with her daughter, Victoria was still born perfectly healthy. Victoria, who was also called Queen by her friends and family, loved life and other people. The 10-year-old attended Petroglyph Elementary School, where she met and made numerous friends. Making friends was an easy thing for Victoria to do, as she was always so friendly to others. She also had an amazing laugh and a cute smirk. Victoria loved to ride her bike, go rollerblading, and, on occasion, she would go four-wheeling with her Nana and Grandpa. She additionally loved to swim, and gymnastics was her passion. Victoria's mother had a low IQ, around 90, but she was still said to take good care of her son, Matthew, and her daughter, Victoria. When Victoria was about a year old, her mother began dating a man named Jason Oding. They moved in together and had their son, Matthew, at the time that Victoria was 2 years old. Eventually, the two split up, and Michelle took her two children and moved to an apartment of her own in 2014. Jason would still continue to financially support as well as have visits with his son, Matthew, and he would say that Michelle always seemed to be a responsible parent. Then, in March of 2016, Michelle would contact Child Protective Services after her current boyfriend, David Hernandez, tried to kiss and then put his hands down Victoria's pants. David had a history of sexually abusing children, including several in his own family. He had also been arrested for attempting to kidnap a 4-year-old girl in 2013. However, he had never been charged for the sexual assaults, and while he was arrested for the attempted kidnapping, the charges would end up being dropped. Michelle had immediately broken things off with David when she found out that he was doing these things to Victoria, and she kicked him out of the apartment, claiming that she had not known his history up until then. Following this incident, Child Protective Services would refer Michelle to the Albuquerque Police Department, but when she spoke with them, they told her there was nothing they could do because trying to kiss a child was not illegal. Victoria's mother, Michelle, would end up contacting Child Services a total of 5 times between March of 2016 and July of 2016, though it's unknown exactly why she had contacted them, as no action arose from these reports. Also, sometime in mid-2016, Michelle would start a new job at Smith's Food and Drug, where she was said to be a good worker, and she went in for every scheduled shift. In order for her to obtain this job, she had to pass a drug test as well, and she did that with no problems. Now, in July of 2016, Victoria's mother, Michelle, would meet her new boyfriend. He was named Fabian Gonzalez. She met him on the dating site Plenty of Fish. He had moved in with Michelle, Victoria, and Victoria's little brother, Matthew, and would often watch the children while Michelle went to work. But Fabian had told Michelle to keep their relationship a secret from her parents, which was likely because he wanted to hide his criminal background. Michelle did not know about Fabian's prior criminal history, which included driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, and child abuse. However, the child abuse charge had not resulted from him actually hurting a child, but rather it was the result of Fabian and an ex-girlfriend getting into a fight while Fabian was driving his car and the child was in the back seat. Then on August 15, 2016, Fabian's cousin, Jessica Kelly, was released from prison. And just days later, on August 17th, he would reach out to her and invite her to stay with them at Michelle's apartment. But Jessica was not the kind of person that you would want around children. Not only was she a known methamphetamine user, but she also had a long criminal history, which included trafficking controlled substances, assault on a family member, and conspiracy to commit criminal penetration. While Jessica had been locked up serving time on her other charges, she had acted as a lookout while another inmate raped a woman in September of 2012. So this wonderful woman, Jessica Kelly, began staying with Michelle, Fabian, and the 2 children, sleeping on the couch in the 3-bedroom apartment. On the afternoon of Victoria's 10th birthday, August 23, 2016, prior to her arriving home on the school bus, her mother, Michelle, and Fabian decided to take off around 2:30 to go pick up some drinks and marijuana. They also stopped by the home of one of Fabian's relatives during this time, and this relative would warn Fabian and Michelle that they should not have Jessica staying at the apartment because she was acting rather weird. Jessica had given the relative her EBT card to use, but refused to give the PIN number because the devil told her not to. During the time that they were gone, Michelle would text her own mother and ask her if she could pick up Victoria from the bus stop. However, since she didn't hear from her mother back in a timely manner, Fabian was able to convince Michelle to let Jessica pick up Victoria from the bus stop, saying that they could trust her and Victoria would be safe with her. Michelle agreed, though Jessica wouldn't end up showing up at the bus stop to get Victoria. And the little girl ended up walking to a neighbor's apartment instead. This neighbor then contacted Michelle to let her know that Victoria was looking for her. The mother, along with her boyfriend Fabian, would end up arriving back at the apartment around 5 p.m. Around 6, Fabian would take Victoria to the gas station and buy her a soda. At the same time, Jessica, who was still back at the apartment, was speaking on the phone with her sister, and she would tell her sister that she was tweaking out and hallucinating due to a long bender of using meth. Once Victoria and Fabian arrived back from the gas station, Michelle and Fabian would take off again, leaving Victoria alone with Jessica. The couple would arrive back at the apartment again less than an hour later, but this time Michelle did not check on her daughter. They then left again only minutes later, and shortly after that, 2 neighbors would remember having a conversation with Jessica and Victoria. During which time, Jessica would tell them that she had given Victoria money, then quickly pull the little girl back inside. What happened after that is up for debate. But Victoria Martins was supposed to be celebrating her 10th birthday the next day at a party that her mom had organized at the apartment for family and friends. Unfortunately, before that could happen, in the early morning hours of August 24th, around 4 a.m., police were being called to the apartment where the little girl lived with her mother, after it was reported that Jessica had attacked Fabian and Michelle. A neighbor had actually been the one to contact police after Fabian had ran down and began knocking on the door and told them to contact 911 because his girlfriend was being attacked. Shortly after he had knocked, Michelle also appeared at the neighbor's door, and she had a bloody gash on her forehead, as well as blood on her face, chest, and arms, and she said, "She killed my daughter." According to the neighbor, Michelle was in shock, but didn't really appear to have much emotion on her face. She was there, but not really. When authorities arrived at the apartment, Jessica Kelly was the one to come and answer the door, since Fabian and Michelle had already fled after she attacked them. As soon as Jessica realized that it was the authorities, she shut the door in their face, so they had to force their way into the property. When they did, they found a horrific scene. A fire had been set in the bathroom of the apartment. Right before Jessica had tried to make an escape and she jumped off the balcony, she set fire to something that was inside the bathtub. When the fire was put out, it was discovered that the fire had actually been set to the body of 10-year-old Victoria. She was wrapped up in a blanket and had also been partially dismembered, with some of her organs being found in a trash bag inside of a laundry hamper in the apartment's living room. The police quickly arrested all 3 adults on the scene, Michelle, Fabian, and Jessica. Victoria's younger brother, Matthew, who also normally lived at the apartment, was luckily with his father that night. Now, Jessica, who had tried to jump off the balcony in an attempt to flee from police, had broken her ankle in the process. Michelle and Fabian both had facial injuries at the time of their booking, due to being attacked by Jessica with an iron.
Come here. Come here.
I didn't do nothing.
Come here.
That's Jessica Kelly speaking to police in August 2016.
There's some
that went down. No, I didn't do nothing.
Hey, stop.
In the video, police confront Kelly, who is limping after jumping off a balcony.
Why'd you lock the door?
Somebody just started a fire and I went over the balcony, dude.
What were you fighting about?
She woke up and asked where her daughter was.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where she's at, dude.
Okay. No, we got her. She's in another apartment.
Huh?
Did you hit her? Did you hit her?
Huh?
Did you hit somebody?
She hit me and I hit her back. As one officer talks to Kelly to get her side of the story, a couple of other officers go into the apartment, not knowing what they'll find. When they finally come out, their demeanor is changed. They seem upset.
Put her in your car, man. You're gonna
My leg's
walk.
broken. I just got thrown off the balcony.
You didn't get thrown off. You jumped off. I saw you close the door.
The officers then get a call from dispatch.
Can you advise what we're looking at here? Male, female, close breathing?
Walk.
No.
Female 10.
No.
Before they reach the officer's car, Kelly tells them there was another person with her in the apartment.
Who else was in the apartment with you?
Another guy.
Where's the other guy?
He took off. He started trying to wipe blood off. And I started panicking.
Who's the other guy?
I don't know his name. They call him Macote.
It would be determined that Victoria had died as a result of manual strangulation. The medical examiner also found that there were stab wounds to her body as well as minor trauma to her rectum. Victoria's blood alcohol content was also found to be a 0.02. However, this was said to be from decomposition, and she actually didn't have any substances in her body at the time she died. The medical examiner also discovered that Victoria had HPV. Michelle Martins, Fabian Gonzalez, and Jessica Kelly were all indicted on multiple charges, including intentional abuse of a child, aggravated criminal sexual penetration, murder, and tampering with evidence. Following Jessica Kelly's arrest, she had been brought to a hospital due to her broken ankle. While she was there, she refused to give any DNA sample to police, but they ended up obtaining a warrant and forcing her to do so. Jessica also requested a lawyer at this time and refused to tell police anything other than there were 3 other people in the apartment that night and they should be looking for Victoria's real killer. When Fabian Gonzalez was interviewed, he denied having any involvement in Victoria's murder. He told police that he and Michelle had left Victoria alone with Jessica that evening. That night was actually supposed to be the last night that Jessica was even staying in the apartment, because Fabian had informed her that she needed to move out the next day due to her acting very strange. When they had gotten home that night, Victoria had been sleeping, and they didn't want to wake her, so they went off to bed themselves. Fabian said that he and Michelle were then awoken hours later by Jessica attacking them.
She woke you up. Let me clarify, okay? What time did you guys go to bed?
We went to bed like, let's say 12:40.
This morning?
Yes. We were like wondering what she was going to bed here. So kind of she just went up. So I wanted her to go to bed. And then her walking up the house. You know, I still had to get that trust in her. You know what I mean? This was like kind of iffy. You know, feel for us or whatever. Now we get encouraged. But I'm very sure it was like we kind of to go to bed. And then after we got woken up around 1:32.
How do you know that only you do 1:32? Did you look at a clock or did you look at a phone? Tell me how you know.
How I know is because I asked her, she said,
You guys do.
she said, I got home. I said, well, what do you? I got home. What time is it? So I'm using the TV here. And that's when she said it's nice. And so that way, right after she said that, we were like still kind of waking up, caught up and looked back, right? We were still kind of waking up. She woke up and said that. Then she got home. Like I said, I asked her what's going on, you know, she like, nothing to do. And then she goes, hey, should we do that? You didn't sit here. I'm like, well, I guess you got something there. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And before I got finished, so I was like, I got her too. So I was all picking up. And she was standing there. You didn't even see it. You know, she thought she got home. So she did it. So she was looking very good.
You motioned that her hand was behind her back.
Yeah, kind of like that. But I didn't see it. But I didn't see it. I just didn't understand like that. So I was kind of still waking up. And we wake up and kind of focus on something or somebody, you know.
Where would you get that?
You laid around in our bedroom.
You guys were in your
Master bedroom.
in the master bedroom. You guys both laid out. What side of the bed or where was she at? Or where was she
I
at?
think in the middle of us, like in the bed.
She was on the bed?
Like in the, no, not on it, but like in the middle of the bed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she got home. She was like, I can't feel her hold, but I was still kind of figure out, you know. She had anyone there or something, you know what I mean? That's all people.
Okay, so she's standing in the middle of the bed. You motioned that she had a
Yeah, I was like, can't focus on her head. And that's when she said, call the phone. And then I have to always change it. So I'll have to right away, you know. She said that, like, you know, she said, what time is it? Or I said, what time is it? She said, it was 1:40, you know what I mean? It was 2 hours. first one before I took her that I'm off with. And she said, of course I use for that. You're crazy.
So she said your footage?
Yeah. Good. Hey. I got scared. And I was trying to fight her off, and we're like, calling her, and I was trying to do that again. I didn't know if there was even a house in the house. She called her, and I was scared about Victoria.
Where was Victoria?
She was supposed to be in the room. And I was angry when she wasn't coming out. She comes up, hey, put it down, what the heck? I was getting for it again, you know, so, okay. She came out, and got feeling like, she saw me, they didn't really wear it, but she was trying to fight off of it. But she wanted to help check on baby, and get her off her, you know. And I figured out, that she was really going to hide it, baby, not psychopathic.
Psychopathic?
Cage curse or something.
Cage curse? The first time you ever seen her act that way before?
Yes.
Okay. Alright. So then, you fight her, you take the hider away, correct?
Yeah, and I was like, so get under, go. Try to go. I guess she was still trying to speak out, she was trying to come and play it. And I went to get the fight, and I pulled it up, she said, no. And I do it, I do it. How can you get this out? And
I don't care if you guys can fight.
yeah. And I'm like, what's the other stuff about this shit? You know, how angry, you guys don't even get it. And, like, when I did that, she kind of went to go find Sean. I got back to the house, so I was like, where you go? She called her again. I started like, fucking, like, she's doing that in my house. And I was like, oh, that's right. So I'm going back to the house, and I know, go to the house. She was trying to get the car roll out to get money, and she's like, okay, look, I didn't know if they were getting out the house, or they were going to I didn't know. Okay. We were scared, couple of that.
Okay, so when you jump, you run, right, and then you go to that neighbor's. When you guys got to that apartment, there's a pair of bloody socks.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah.
Was it both your feet?
Yeah,
What about those?
there's the white one.
So Michelle's black ones, yours are
The black one.
the black ones?
Yeah, and because like he was still soaking wet, you know.
Okay.
From one in the grass and skins, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You need to use that because you understand it.
Yeah, I did.
All right. So did Michelle tell you anything about her encounter with Jessica?
She was black and was hospital here around the house and I still get it out of I don't know where. How that I still get it out of I don't know what she did. I don't know if she did it. I couldn't do it here. I know. And she just did that yeah, first and all the way to the road, you know that. And when she woke up, it was like that confident for her talking about the situation what happened. You know?
Right. Did you see anything about Victoria?
Oh, she said, and what she said, she goes, you're not dead. But she told me, you're not dead or something like that.
When it was time for detectives to speak with Victoria's mother, Michelle, her story was similar to Fabian's. They had left her daughter, Victoria, alone with Jessica. When they got back home, they didn't check on her because she was sleeping. Only hours after that were they awoken by Jessica attacking them, and it's then that Michelle found out that Victoria was dead. Michelle told authorities that when Victoria had been left alone with Jessica, she had accidentally ingested some meth, and this had killed her. But police weren't buying her story and told her that Fabian was confessing to everything, though he wasn't. So after hours of questioning, Michelle would finally break and admit to horrific crimes. She told police that she knew her boyfriend Fabian and his cousin Jessica had been S.A.ing her daughter Victoria. At least 3 times, she said, leading up to her death. The mother then admitted to police that she had seen Fabian and Jessica give her daughter meth. They had then S.A.'d her and murdered her. She claimed she watched while this happened. Michelle also admitted to police that in the past, she had had men over to have sex with Victoria for her own gratification.
We had hot dogs, hamburgers, the kids played together, went to the pool. We spent the entire day till nightfall with Michelle.
July 4th, John and Pat Martins and their friend Laura Bob say life couldn't have been more normal. Just 6 weeks later, their granddaughter, Victoria Martins, would be murdered. The Martins say all the way up to the hours before her death, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Victoria had just celebrated her 10th birthday at school.
I spoke to her Tuesday afternoon. I says, how was your party?
5 o'clock, we talked to her.
She says, oh, it was good. Did they sing happy birthday to you at school? Yes. I said, how were the cupcakes? She says, oh, they were good.
Wednesday, August 24th.
I got a call from the hospital that Michelle was in there, a domestic
They called
dispute.
us. I said, domestic dispute. I'm like, she's not with nobody. What are you talking about, domestic dispute?
Thinking of the whole incident. Thinking of the pain that Victoria must have went through. And to what point. And thinking of my daughter sitting in there. What is she doing in there? You know? How'd she get herself into this?
So how did, as they describe her, a single, hardworking mom who had never been arrested and loved her kids more than anything, allegedly do this to her own child?
Did you suspect any drug use by Michelle at all?
None.
Our daughter never did drugs. She never drank.
The Martins say Michelle had just passed a drug test 3 months earlier to land a job at Smith's.
Went to the job every day.
They say Michelle was responsible and active in Victoria and her 8-year-old brother's lives.
If there was something going on, she masked it so well, and she built such a prolific, persona with us. We never saw this. Michelle didn't change until these people inducted themselves into her life. That's when she changed. What kind of power they had over her, I don't know.
Did Victoria or Matt, did they ever mention this guy, or?
No.
They never said anything about meeting him?
Neither one of them.
The Martins, who retired here to help with the grandkids, say both kids were always happy. They believe maybe the kids stayed silent because of the love for their mother.
That's probably why she never said nothing.
Yeah.
She didn't want to get him in trouble.
John has gone to visit Michelle twice in jail. She can't talk about the case, but he's asked one thing.
Why? Why bring these people into your house?
What does she say?
Well, she told me, she says, I was trying to help them out to get on their feet.
The Martins say it's difficult standing by their daughter.
We didn't know our daughter to be anybody that would do something like this. And if there's evidence and she's found guilty, then she deserves to be punished.
Punished just like the other two.
And regardless the outcome, they say they'll always love their daughter.
But I know Victoria's somewhere in heaven now saying, forgive my mom.
That's exactly what she's saying.
Forgive my mom.
Multiple things with her story, however, that didn't make sense. One being that she said that Victoria had ingested meth, but none was found in her system at the time of the autopsy. Police had also found no evidence of drugs or drug paraphernalia at the scene. Then, years after Victoria's murder, a psychological profile would show that Michelle Martins had personality traits that made her susceptible to false confessions. An outside medical expert would claim that Michelle did not function at the same level that most people do, and she was always trying to please people and give them the answers that they wanted. So it's believed that detectives had sold Michelle on what they believed happened to Victoria. and coerced her into making false confessions in the case. Looking at Michelle's confession, many of her statements were contradictory, and to many of the things that she was asked, she would just say, mm-hmm, or uh-huh, because she was just agreeing with information and not coming up with all of it on her own. The other reason why Michelle's confessions were not to be completely believed was because it was discovered that neither she nor Fabian had actually been home at the time that her daughter had been murdered. Cell phone records placed the couple outside of the home during the time that police believed Victoria had been murdered, sometime between 7 and 8:45 p.m. Due to this new evidence, the murder charges against Michelle were dropped. The rape and murder charges against Fabian were also dropped, and he was instead given charges of child abuse and tampering with evidence, as authorities believed that he had helped his cousin Jessica clean up the crime scene and partially dismember Victoria's body. Then, in January of 2019, the rape charges against Jessica were dropped after it was discovered that there was not enough evidence that Victoria had even been raped that night. It was very likely that the tearing they had found on her anus could have been caused from something like constipation. Also in January, a plea deal would be reached for Jessica Kelly, and she pleaded no contest to child abuse resulting in death. The murder charges against her were dropped, and she was sentenced to 50 years in prison with 6 suspended. As part of her plea deal, Jessica agreed to testify against Fabian. So the state of New Mexico decided to give her a plea deal, the only one who was still charged with murder, so she could testify against Fabian, who was only accused of helping her clean up the crime scene after. Makes sense. The thing is, other than her testimony, there was no evidence that Fabian had helped to clean up the crime scene. Victoria's mother, Michelle, would also accept a plea deal, and she was sentenced to 12 years behind bars. As part of her plea deal, she was also required to testify against Fabian. Fabian's trial would not begin until July of 2022, and he had actually been out on bond since the end of 2019 after prosecutors failed to prove that he was a danger to the community. When the trial began, it was the prosecution's view that an unknown man who had been seeking gang retaliation against Fabian was actually the one who had killed Victoria. They based this theory on statements from Jessica as well as new DNA evidence that had been found. New DNA belonging to an unknown male had been found on Victoria's body, primarily on her back. And while they were not able to identify who this DNA belonged to, they were able to rule out every male in Victoria's life, including Fabian, and officers who had worked on the case. However, this DNA could easily have come from someone that Victoria was playing with at school that day. Now, Jessica, who previously would not tell police anything, had been given a plea deal, so she had a new story to tell. She admitted to being high on meth the entire day before Victoria had been killed, and was very paranoid. Jessica also admitted on the stand that following her release from prison, she'd been sleeping on Michelle's couch, and she had been constantly on the lookout for drugs, as well as men to sleep with. She said that she would bring these strange men over to Michelle's apartment during the day and have sex with them on her couch. According to Jessica, when Victoria had come home from school on August 23rd, during the time that Fabian and Michelle were out of the apartment, Jessica had become very paranoid and thought someone was going to roll up as she saw a car with 2 people in it repeatedly driving by. She said that sometime after Michelle and Fabian had left, a man entered the apartment and said he was looking for Fabian. The man then, without any warning, had gone into Victoria's room, SA'd her, and killed her.
Some guy just shows up. I left the door open, so he kind of walks in. He asked, where's Fable? And I told him he wasn't here.
Kelly testified she thought that man might be Victoria's dad, and that he then walked into Victoria's room.
I ended up grabbing a cigarette and going to the balcony and smoking a cigarette, not thinking anything was going to happen. And when he came out, he let me know that we had something to clean up in there.
Around sunset on August 23, 2016, Kelly testified she checked Victoria's pulse and found none, adding she told Gonzalez what had happened once he and Michelle returned home later that evening.
Because he was like, for real, cuz, what the f? And I was like, for real, what are we gonna do? We have to get rid of her body, no. And he said, all right, we'll take turns.
So you fabricated the story about the other guy wiping blood off. Is that right? That didn't happen.
That did not happen.
But if this man never came into the apartment, the truth would be 200 years, not 44, correct?
No, because it would have never happened if that man would have never entered the apartment. We wouldn't be here today.
Once this man had left and Fabian had arrived back home, according to Jessica, she told Fabian that Victoria was dead, and they needed to conceal the homicide. But they didn't tell Michelle. Instead, Fabian had instructed her to cook dinner, then put her to bed. While Michelle was asleep, Jessica claimed that she and Fabian had dismembered Victoria's body. But Jessica also would admit on the stand that she had tried to kill Michelle and Fabian in the middle of the night when she had hit Michelle with an iron. So why she didn't get charged with attempted murder right then and there, I'm not sure. It also shows that she's very clearly capable of killing somebody. But it was the prosecution's theory that this unknown man had killed Victoria, and Jessica and Fabian had just helped to clean up the crime. There was an incident that had happened days before Victoria's murder on August 21st that they attempted to use as proof. That day, Jessica's family and friends had held a barbecue for her to celebrate her release from prison, and Fabian, who was not invited, had attended anyways. During the party, Fabian was asked to leave by a woman who claimed that he had stolen from her in the past. But he refused to go and ended up getting into a fight with two people in which he obtained a black eye. Following the fight, Fabian had driven to his brother's home, then called up this woman and threatened to bring his brothers back to the party with him. They are said to be founding members of the TCK gang that Fabian was also a part of. Later that same day, Fabian would get into another argument with this woman via text message, and he would go online and search for guns as well. Also, on the same night that Victoria had been killed, around 10:25 p.m., Fabian sent 2 text messages to the woman whom he'd gotten into a fight with, and they said, "Answer me and get over here now, or I will go looking for you." The thing is, there was zero physical evidence that Fabian had actually helped Jessica clean up the crime scene. None of Victoria's DNA had been found on Fabian, and vice versa. Additionally, Fabian's fingerprints were not found on the knife block or any of the knives, though Jessica's were. His fingerprints were also not found on the laundry basket that contained Victoria's remains or the plastic bag. Police would only find his fingerprints on a mop in the home and 2 CDs. Prosecutors also attempted to highlight Fabian's shifting story and lack of detail in his interviews with police. They noted a missing gap of time in Fabian's timeline of events from the early morning hours of August 24th. This was because he said that the attack on him and Michelle had taken place around 2 o'clock in the morning. But to be fair, he had asked Jessica what time it was because she had taken his and Michelle's phone, and she was the one who replied back telling him it was 2 a.m. He didn't actually confirm this himself. Also, to try to prove their case against Fabian, the prosecution was clinging to the fact that a sock belonging to Fabian had been found to contain Victoria's remains. This sock, however, had been found inside a hamper, the same hamper that Victoria's remains had been found inside of. So you do the math. Multiple witnesses would testify during Fabian's trial, and they would say that at 8:45 p.m. on August 23rd, they had seen Jessica walking down the apartment stairs carrying Victoria's body wrapped in a blanket. The little girl looked like she could have just been asleep, though it was later discovered that she was indeed dead at this time. As Jessica had walked down the stairs, she spotted Fabian and Michelle, who were still in Michelle's car after they had just returned back home, and they were listening to very loud music. According to Jessica, they were both paranoid and tweaking out at the time. She said that Michelle was using meth. However, it's said that Michelle was just high from marijuana and had actually never used any other drugs in her life. She had also just recently passed a drug test to get her new job at the grocery store, so that's up for debate. Jessica got about 6 feet away from the car before she quickly spun her body back around and then yelled over her shoulder to Fabian and Michelle, asking if they were ready to go upstairs to the apartment. Fabian had yelled back, "No, not yet," and Jessica then went back up the stairs carrying Victoria still. Fabian and Michelle would follow a few minutes later. If multiple witnesses saw Jessica carrying Victoria in a blanket and they thought that she was just sleeping, then chances are Fabian and Michelle, who were high at the time and listening to very loud music, not paying attention, probably thought the same. Authorities had also discovered a letter from Victoria written to Fabian that had a red heart cut out on the front, and it read, "I like you because you are funny. I really like you. We were supposed to go to the zoo today, and I just like you." When it was Michelle's turn to testify, she would say that Fabian had not gotten out of bed at all that night, and she never implicated him in any wrongdoing. The only person that did implicate him was Jessica, the same one who also admitted to being extremely delusional and paranoid, and admitted to trying to kill Fabian and Michelle. Throughout the entire ordeal, Fabian Gonzalez had refused to take a plea deal. Because as he said, "I am innocent and I would never plead guilty to something I didn't do." However, in the end, he was found guilty of child abuse and tampering with evidence and was sentenced to 37.5 years in prison. Also following Victoria's murder, her maternal grandparents filed a wrongful death lawsuit, claiming that the report of Michelle's ex-boyfriend trying to kiss Victoria had never been properly investigated. A law enforcement official had also lied and said that these claims had been investigated following Victoria's death. However, in February of 2021, the lawsuit was dismissed.
The mom had told us that there was nothing that was going on in the home, that she removed the boyfriend.
That's the voice of Officer Fred Duran back in January. He was a spokesperson for APD and was responding to a reporter at the Albuquerque Journal who was trying to confirm if officers investigated claims that a man tried to kiss Victoria Martins 5 months before she was killed.
And when the detectives spoke to the kids, they didn't make any allegations that anything had happened.
The problem is detectives never spoke to the kids.
The investigation showed that absolutely Officer D did lie, set up and lie about the involvement of APD.
The Civilian Police Oversight Agency launched an investigation months ago. Members of the board met earlier this week to discuss the findings of that investigation.
The investigation found that it was a supervisor from the Crimes Against Children unit who told APD that the information they gave the Journal was wrong.
The CPOA says a different APD spokesperson, Selena Espinosa, was told about the mistake but never did anything to correct it. In a statement today, Espinosa admitted the miscommunication and says APD takes these issues very seriously. The Oversight Board is now recommending both spokespersons be disciplined.
After they filed this lawsuit, the grandparents of Victoria Martins were harassed on a daily basis, with many people thinking that they had known about Michelle trafficking her daughter, and that was how she had gotten an STD. The thing is, no one in Victoria's life had noticed any signs of her being SA'd. Michelle had also called child services on her own after she found out that David had attempted to kiss Victoria, and she immediately kicked him out of her house. She even called the police over it, and then continued to call child services multiple times after. I just can't see a mother showing that level of concern and then just weeks later selling her daughter to random men. It doesn't make sense. As for the STD that they found out Victoria had, as I had said, it was HPV. And while it could have been from her being SA'd, it also can be passed from a mother to a child during birth if Michelle had it. Or the ex-boyfriend, David Hernandez, could have easily given her that STD just from the kissing. So while Michelle should have known better and never left Victoria in Jessica's care that night, and Fabian should have known as well, even though Victoria was not his daughter, in the end, I think Jessica is the only one who is responsible for killing and dismembering this little girl. As the news spread about Victoria's death, neighbors and friends had built a makeshift memorial under a tree near the apartment complex where she lived, adorning it with stuffed animals and candles. And in the evening, dozens of people would gather for a candlelight vigil to honor Victoria. Another shrine for her was erected at Petroglyph Elementary School, where Victoria had just started the new school year. School officials said in a statement that, like the rest of the community, their hearts ache. Victoria is in our thoughts and prayers as we hold our children just a little tighter on this sad day. A memorial service would be held for Victoria Martins on Saturday, October 29th, 2016, at Cooper Point Church in Albuquerque.
Hard to imagine how this child's death could be any more traumatic.
The 29-year-old father conducted multiple Google searches, including how do you know if a baby is dead, in the hour after she stopped breathing before ever calling 911.
Zara Lynn Scruggs was born in Pennsylvania on December 1st, 2019, to her mother, Erica Scruggs, and her father, Austin Kamal Stevens. She was lovingly nicknamed Moo, and she was said to be a smart, silly, playful, loving, and sassy little girl. Zara also loved music, dancing, going on the swings at the park, and anything Elmo. At the time of this story, Zara, who was only 10 months old, had just begun walking and was also enjoying learning to talk. Zara's mother and father were no longer together. However, they had a joint custody agreement in regards to their daughter. Now, this agreement was not court-mandated, just a simple agreement between the two. Zara's father, Austin, worked as an assistant youth football coach for the Lower Providence Warriors, and he was also the co-owner of a construction company called Black Diamond Construction. On the night of Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, 10-month-old Zara was picked up by her father at her maternal grandparents' home in Norristown, Pennsylvania. He then brought her back to his new apartment, which was located at 3454 Germantown Pike in Lower Providence. Austin had actually just moved into this apartment 2 days prior, so he had yet to set up the heat, hot water, and electricity, making it go down to only about 52 degrees in the apartment that night. Then, around 10:40 p.m. that night, Austin would call 911 to report that Zara was unresponsive. Shortly after, the first responders arrived at Austin's apartment, and they found Zara lying on the bed with no clothes on, just a diaper. She wasn't breathing, her skin was gray, and she was cold to the touch. And Zara's father, Austin, was standing at the foot of the bed, completely calm, almost emotionless. Now, a paramedic had begun to perform CPR on Zara almost immediately upon arrival. And when Austin had been asked by this first responder to hand him a piece of medical equipment from his bag, Austin just tilted his head and shrugged when he'd been told that he handed him the wrong thing. Zara would then be transported to Einstein Medical Center in Montgomery, Pennsylvania. Here, she would be pronounced dead less than 2 hours later at 12:12 a.m. on October 4th, 2020. And when Austin was informed by a doctor of his daughter's death, he simply sighed.
Little baby. Ooh, give me those toes. Give me those toes. Give me those toes. Give me your baby. Give me your baby. Give me your baby.
Now, of course, Austin was arrested and brought in for questioning. And when he spoke with police, he told them that he had actually been giving his daughter Zara a bath, but he stepped out of the bathroom for a brief moment to grab a beer. When he'd been in the kitchen, Austin had suddenly heard a thump, and he claimed that he believed this was Zara's head hitting the bathtub. The father told investigators that upon hearing this noise, he immediately returned back to the bathroom, and he then took Zara out of the bathtub and wrapped her up in a towel. After that, Austin said he began to try to soothe her, then placed her on the bed to change her diaper. Austin said that suddenly, though, her head fell back and Zara became unresponsive. It was like she passed out, he said. Now, it would become very clear that this was all lies after detectives recovered a diaper that Zara had been wearing on the way to the hospital. Medics had actually discovered that the diaper was saturated in blood. In addition, it would be determined that Zara's death had been caused by blunt force trauma to her head, and she had sustained anal trauma. Soon after his arrest, police would discover that Austin actually had not called 911 for nearly an hour after he knew that something was seriously wrong with his daughter. Detectives had discovered this after they searched Austin's phone and found that he had placed various Google searches, including My baby isn't breathing? How do you know if a baby is dead? And what if you don't hear a baby's heartbeat? When detectives questioned Austin about these searches, he claimed that he was just trying to figure out what was going on with Zara himself, and he was trying to resuscitate her. He explained that he had just been on the internet because he was trying to figure out exactly how to perform CPR. But authorities also found evidence that showed that Austin had been messaging 2 different women on Instagram while his daughter was lying there unconscious. And in these messages, there was no discussion about Zara whatsoever or her current need for emergency medical care. And the father's response when a detective asked him about one of these messages was, "It's just a girl I talked to." And then he said he didn't even have a full-blown conversation with her. Like that even matters. Police would also ask Austin why it had taken him about 70 minutes for him to call 911. To which he said, "I was panicking. Time was rolling. I wasn't paying attention to the time. I was working the phone. I was working her body, pumping her chest, trying to bring her back. I did what I could." A detective would say that during his interrogation, Austin had said that he wished he could have been the hero, which is a very odd thing to say when you're the one who caused all of this to begin with. But by the end of his interrogation with police, Austin would finally admit that he had waited much too long to call 911. Austin Stevens was charged with aggravated SA, RAPE of a child, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, aggravated indecent assault, endangering the welfare of a child, and other criminal counts. He was held on a $1 million bail. That bail, however, was quickly revoked at his preliminary hearing when the charge of first-degree murder was added to Austin's other charges. Zara's devastated grandfather, Eric, whom she'd been with just before her father, Austin, had picked her up that night, said, "This is shocking. Austin always respected me, and he always respected us. You would never think that anything like this would even happen in a million years." And after her daughter's death, Erica Scruggs took to Facebook and she wrote, "He fooled us all, I promise you, from the bottom of my heart. Please do not attack his family or his friends. He will pay." And Stephen's own mother even came out publicly because she wanted to make it known that her son is a monster, and neither she or Stephen's father support him in any way. Colleagues of Stevens, who had worked with him at Black Diamond Construction, where he was a co-owner, said that what happened is not at all in his character, and some other variables had to have been at play. It seemed like no one had seen the evil that was lurking deep down inside Austin, who had always made himself look like a caring, driven, and loving father. In March of 2022, Austin Stevens was found guilty by a jury in the death of his daughter, Zara Scruggs, and he was automatically given a life sentence. Zara's relatives launched a GoFundMe page after her death in order to help her grieving mother. The fundraiser ended up gaining over $52,000 in donations. On the night of October 9, 2020, at least 500 people packed the streets in front of the home where Zara had once lived with her mother, Erica. They were not there to remember the horrific way in which Zara had died, but instead the amazing little girl that she had been while she was alive. Those gathered that night released thousands of pink balloons in the infant's memory.
Tonight here in Norristown feels like almost every single person in this community coming out to remember the baby girl and honor her family.
I'm gonna miss her.
It is impossible to imagine what the family of 10-month-old Zara Scruggs is going through.
I can't sleep. I still wake up at 5.
But hundreds of friends, family members, neighbors in Norristown want to make sure they're not going through it alone.
Say your name! Zara!
At least 500 people Friday packing the street in front of the home where Zara, known affectionately as Moo, lived with her mother Erica.
I just love y'all because y'all love my baby. And I appreciate everybody.
Releasing thousands of balloons in the infant's memory. trying to erase the thought of the heinous way she left this world.
We didn't think nothing bad, nothing. Did we? If I had a clue, no. The love right now, I mean, even with his other side, his family, please, no. We never thought anything like this.
But the focus tonight is not on him or the dastardly crimes police say he committed. It is on supporting Zara's mother and her grandparents.
I don't want no mother to feel what I felt that night.
As they take this lifelong journey, an impossible attempt trying to recover from this nightmare.
This is Zara's night. This is Zara's night.
And little Zara's funeral was then held on Monday, October 12th, 2020. In memory of the little girl, on what would have been Zara's first birthday, December 1st, 2020, her family held a stop-and-drop toy drive. All donations collected were given to Children's Hospital and St. Christopher's Hospital. Giovanna Laria Hernandez, lovingly called Gio, was born on August 30th, 2011 in Austin, Texas. Her parents' names were Refugio, Jr. for short, Hernandez, and Crystal Villanueva. Gio loved to sing, dance, watch funny YouTube videos, and she also loved playing with Shopkins and spending time with her adoring grandparents, who she would often host tea parties for. Gio also loved playing with her cousins. She was said to be a very kind and compassionate little girl. Crystal Villanueva and Junior Hernandez met when they were just teens. In 2011, Crystal, who was 19 at the time, became pregnant and soon gave birth to the couple's beautiful daughter, Gio. So sometimes the couple would live together with Gio, but there was other times where they would live apart. Junior would live with his mother, Nancy, and his stepfather, Eustorgio, in Kyle, Texas. And during those times, Crystal and Gio would stay with Crystal's family in Austin, Texas. Now, Gio's mother, Crystal, had a history of mental illness as well as drug abuse. So at the end of 2016, when Crystal was 24 and Gio was 5, Crystal and Junior discussed Crystal and Gio moving back in with him and his mother and stepfather. So then on January 3rd, 2017, Crystal and Gio did move back in with them to their home in Kyle. That night, Junior ended up having to take Crystal to the hospital because she had been repeatedly vomiting. Crystal would later say that she had a delusional break from reality, had shaved off some body hair, and drank bleach to rid herself of a witch. She also said that Nancy and Eustorgio, Junior's parents, were trying to poison her. She, however, never said any of this at the time that she was at the hospital, and she never told anybody else this. This was only later that she said that. So it's unsure if that's actually true or not. Then 2 days later, on January 5th, Junior and his mother had both left for work early that morning. Eustorgio spent the morning in his bedroom watching TV, while Crystal had done some laundry, bathed Gio, and then sat outside on her computer. Around lunchtime, Eustorgio was sitting at the kitchen table eating when Crystal walked in. Without a single word, she retrieved a large kitchen knife, then turned and returned to her room without a single word. Now, Eustorgio figured this was just normal behavior for Crystal. She often did this because she would cut up fruit and eat it while she was in her room. But after that, Eustorgio heard Gio saying, "No, mommy, no, mommy." But he said that it just sounded like her normal protests when Crystal was trying to take electronics away from her. Then, Crystal came back out to the kitchen and went to pass Eustorgio. As she did, she turned and stabbed him in the back 4 times. After that, he was able to turn around and face her. She then stabbed him twice more before he was able to bite her hand and Crystal dropped the knife. At which point, Eustorgio grabbed the knife and ran out of the house to the neighbor's house to call 911. While Eustorgio and the neighbor were on the 911 call, Crystal suddenly came out of the house holding a BB gun. She pointed the gun at Eustorgio and the neighbor, but luckily for them, it was broken. It didn't fire. Crystal then dropped the gun and turned around and went back inside. When she went back into the house, she also called 911. She told the operator, "These effing people are trying to kill me." And then she gave them her address. A couple minutes passed, and as the 911 operator was trying to ask Crystal more questions, she didn't answer any of them. When she finally did speak, she said that her dad was trying to kill her. When the operator asked her for her name, she at first said Crystal, but then said Nathaniel Walker. The operator asked if he had a weapon, and Crystal said, No, he was just watching TV. My daughter wanted some cereal, and I killed her. The operator, surprised, asked her if that was indeed what she said, to which Crystal responded, "Yeah, I killed her because she wanted some cereal, and then I stabbed my father-in-law." Minutes passed, and Crystal wasn't talking anymore, but the 911 operator could hear a loud banging noise. The operator asked her what she was banging on. She said, "Nothing, I'm just trying to cut my daughter's head off." The operator asked her why, and she said, "'Cause she wanted cereal." About 10 to 15 minutes after the initial 911 call placed by Eustorgio, police officers started arriving to the scene. Once there, they took the knife from Eustorgio and immediately sent him in an ambulance to the hospital, as he was bleeding quite a bit. Crystal's mother was also called, and she immediately drove from Austin to Kyle. Then the SWAT team arrived. Over the next hour, the SWAT officers called for Crystal to come outside. Crystal's mother spoke to the officers and offered to go inside, but they wouldn't allow it, for obvious reasons. She's gonna get her head cut off too. Eventually, the officers were able to get into the house, and Crystal came walking out of the bathroom wearing a towel. She had just taken a shower. She was placed under arrest immediately. She was flailing, kicking, and spitting at everybody as she was arrested. She was also smiling and laughing as she thought it was funny that she was giving them such a hard time. Hopefully that's what it was, and it wasn't for any other reason that she was laughing. They had to put a spit sock, padded helmet, and body restraint on her. The officers brought Crystal to the hospital, where she kept screaming and screaming. When the nurse asked her what her name was, she told her she didn't have a name. She was also trying to break free from her restraints, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, calmed down and asked the nurse for drugs. After she was brought to the hospital, Crystal was then brought to jail. On her way there, Crystal was in the back of the cop car crying and saying, "My baby, I didn't know it was her. Just kill me. I didn't know. I swear. I thought it was a doll. I thought it was an effing clone. I'm so sorry, baby. I swear to God." When the police interviewed Crystal, it was very bizarre. The officer read Crystal her Miranda rights and asked her if she understood. She said, "I'm trying to focus. There's so many voices in my head." The officer told her, "Just listen for my voice. Only listen to that voice." She told him that nothing else mattered because she had killed her daughter and she also had not slept in days. The officer ended up having to read her Miranda warnings 5 times before she would sign them. And when she finally did sign, she signed it no name. She later said that she thought the paper with the written Miranda warnings on it was a contract that they were trying to get her to sign to go work on the streets. Right. Crystal kept asking for Gio and pacing the room. Soon, she bent over and pulled down her pants and defecated in her hands. The officers had to come in and bring her to the ground to restrain her. So 5 days after being booked in jail, Crystal was diagnosed with psychosis and prescribed medication. However, medical records show that she never ended up taking the prescribed medication. Gio had been stabbed and then severely mutilated. Most of her injuries were post-mortem. Various appendages had been cut off. Her skin was sliced from the top of her back down the entire length of her back. Her head was removed, as well as organs that had been piled on top of her body. Both Junior and Eustorgio testified at the trial that Crystal seemed completely normal that morning. Crystal's mother and sister testified at her trial. Shortly before Crystal and Gio had moved in with Junior, They had been living with her mother and sister. Crystal's sister, Samantha, said that she had been spending a lot of time alone in her room, just staring at the ceiling and laughing to herself. She also said at one point she was sitting on her bed, taking apart her cell phone. When Samantha asked her what she was doing, she said, "You can't hear that noise?" Samantha said no, as her cell phone was in 2 different pieces, battery, cell phone. Apparently that didn't matter though, because at that point, Crystal just got some tweezers and started further picking apart the cell phone. Samantha said that she wasn't worried by this because this was normal behavior for Crystal. Crystal's mother would say that when she was just 9 years old, that's when the first signs of her mental illness started showing. Crystal's mother said that a cousin of Crystal's had inappropriately touched her when she was younger, and that had led to the family being driven apart. She said after that, Crystal began seeing a shadow boy or a shadow ghost around the house. But then, when the family moved to a new house, she said that she saw this shadow boy in the new house as well. It was said that during her teen and adult years, Crystal would sometimes hide in closets from invisible assailants. Sometimes she would just completely disappear for days. Once, she was gone for 3 days, and then when she came home, she ran into the house and said that God had touched her and shown her everything, but now the devil was after her. Crystal also believed that people were watching her through the air vents. She would tell her family that the devil was searching for her. Once, Crystal screamed at family members to get down and claimed to have seen a red dot on one person's head from a sniper gun. She said that these snipers were inside of trees outside of their home. Crystal's sister said that another time, while her, Crystal, and their children were shopping, Crystal disappeared. She later found her in the public restroom, saying that she was hiding from the CIA. She was scared to come out and would not come out until Samantha had reassured her that she had called off the CIA for her and they were no longer coming. Her mother and sister tried to attribute all this odd behavior to her mental illness, but she wasn't diagnosed with anything when she was younger. She wasn't actually diagnosed until she went to a drug rehab in 2015 for her substance abuse of crack and meth. There, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and ADHD. So Crystal's family was testifying that she had had these delusions for years. However, when they spoke to police after Gio's death, they told police that they believed all this behavior had been from drug use throughout the years. It wasn't until the case went to court that they all of a sudden started with the crazy defense for her. Her mother would say that she thought Crystal's odd behavior for years was because she smoked weed. Forget those other drugs there. Those are nothing. It's weed that you gotta worry about. Crystal said that 12 hours before Gio died, she had found herself standing over Junior with a knife, ready to stab him. But then all of a sudden, Gio stirred in her bed, and Crystal had snapped out of it. Many times, Crystal would say that she thought the devil was coming for Gio and Junior. She had also at one time told Gio that she was not her daughter, which made poor little Gio cry. One time in June of 2015, the police had encountered Crystal walking alongside a highway, supposedly fleeing from a man named Santana. The man, she said, was capable of turning into a bird and hunting down her, Junior, and Gio. From there, that's when she had gone to drug rehab, where she had been diagnosed with her different mental illnesses. She said that the reason why she had never told anybody about these delusions before is because she was afraid to be committed to a mental hospital, which would have been better than what happened to poor Gio. The doctor that had seen and treated Crystal testified that she was suffering from psychosis, which he said made her meet the requirements for an insanity defense, if the jury would buy that. There had been multiple times that Crystal appeared to have known exactly what she had done to Gio, like when she was on the 911 call, and she told the operator that she was cutting off her head. So the doctor that testified for Crystal believed that she had Capgras syndrome, which is the delusional belief that loved ones have been replaced with imposters. Crystal had believed that Gio had been replaced by a clone or imposter, and that she needed to kill this imposter in order to get her real daughter back. Crystal also believed that there was a key inside this imposter Gio that she needed to find in order to send this imposter back and get her daughter again. Her doctor said that Crystal did not understand that she was stabbing and cutting into a real person. The thing is, Crystal had never spoken of clones or dolls at any time during the 911 call or at the hospital after. It was only after her blood was drawn and she was tested for alcohol and marijuana that she started to talk about the clones and dolls. The jury ended up rejecting Crystal's insanity defense and found her guilty on both charges. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for a capital murder and another 20 years for the aggravated assault of Eustorgio. Her two sentences were ordered to run concurrently. Giovanna Hernandez's funeral was held at the Harrell Funeral Home in Kyle, Texas, and she was later buried on January 10th, 2017 at the San Juan Cemetery in Reedville, Texas. She is greatly missed by so many of her family members, especially her father, Jr. Levi Cole Ellerby was born on December 20th, 2017 in Natchitoches, Louisiana, to his mother, Hannah Barker, and his father, Billy Ellerby Jr. He also had 3 siblings, Brooke Lane, Elizabeth, and Nevaeh. Levi was the happiest baby who always had a big smile. He spent his time playing with siblings and cousins, especially outdoors. He loved watching PJ Masks and playing video games with his Uncle Jay. He was also an animal lover and loved his dog Rex. Levi was lovingly referred to as Chunky Monkey, and his very first word was Dada. In the beginning of 2017, Levi's parents, Billy and Hannah, met. Now, they had both had problems with drugs in the past, but were actively trying to clean their lives up. They had met at drug court while they were both attending, but this was against the rules. You were not allowed to date anyone else who was attending drug court. Not long after they got together, Hannah became pregnant with Levi. Some people would say that she was very excited about the pregnancy, while others would say she was very anxious and scared. While Hannah was pregnant, she got kicked out of drug court and was sent to a 90-day substance abuse program. It's because the court had found out that her and Billy had been dating when they weren't supposed to be. The judge had actually reprimanded her for making a mockery out of the court. She tried to describe their relationship to the judge as only kissing and hugging, but he said that that wasn't okay either. Obviously, because that's still a relationship. You're not just kissing him on the cheek, I assume. And it's not said if Billy got kicked out of drug court as well, or if at that point he was no longer attending. A few months before Levi was born, Billy and Hannah split up. And even though they went their separate ways, they ended up remaining amicable. But it's said that Hannah still desired a romantic relationship with Billy. Hannah worked at a local IHOP. And she also had plans to attend Northwestern State University for sports medicine. She wanted to become an athletic trainer, and she was said to be a wonderful softball player. It seemed she had made a lot of progress in her life. But then, Hannah met a woman named Felicia Smith. She was a co-worker of hers at IHOP, and things changed. This relationship was also not supposed to be happening, because Felicia also had a history of prior drug abuse. Had anyone reported this, Hannah's drug conviction probation would have been revoked, and Levi would have gone to live with his father. There's not a whole lot that's known about Hannah and Felicia's relationship. It was rather short, and Hannah claimed that Felicia was much more into it than she was. On the night of July 17, 2018, the Natchitoches police received a 911 call about a 6-month-old baby who had gone missing from his trailer home along Route 1. It was Hannah Barker's trailer, where she lived with Levi. When police got there, she told them that 2 men had come up to her trailer, started banging on the door, and soon bust through it. She says that they then pepper sprayed her in the face, and she was able to escape them. After she ran around and then came back, they were gone, and they had taken Levi. The Natchitoches police started searching the area for Levi, and they also called in police from 3 other towns. Police did not release any other information in regards to the suspects or what they were supposed to look like. That same night, Levi's grandmother, Kathy Ellerby, had been home when Hannah called her and then subsequently hung up. Kathy tried to call Hannah back, but she didn't answer several calls. Finally, Hannah called Kathy again and told her that Levi was missing. She said he had been kidnapped, but didn't tell her much else. So in a panic, Kathy got in her car and immediately went to Hannah's. When Kathy arrived at Hannah's home, Hannah was sitting in the back of an ambulance. And when Kathy tried to speak with her, she just kept screaming that they were going to kill Levi and that he was going to die. Around 10:20 that night, a passerby spotted a fire near the railroad tracks off of Breda Avenue and called 911. Now, this was only a few blocks away from Hannah's house. When firefighters got there, they discovered not only a fire in a ditch alongside the railroad tracks, but they also discovered little Levi. He was laying face down on the ground, he reeked of gasoline, and he had been badly burnt. Levi was still clinging to life, even though he had 2nd and 3rd degree burns all over his little body. First responders rushed Levi to a local medical center, and from there he was airlifted to University Health in Shreveport. Here, Levi died on July 18th. Little Levi had sustained burns to over 90% of his body. The community was outraged. Who had done this to a 6-month-old little boy? But unfortunately, they wouldn't get very many answers, at least not yet, because a gag order had been issued for the case shortly after Levi had been found. Mourning their loss, the members of the community made a small memorial by placing 2 crosses, stuffed animals, and flowers at the scene where Levi had been found. The investigators assigned to Levi's case were starting to think that the crime scene in Hannah's trailer was starting to look rather staged. The back window of the trailer had been smashed in, but wasn't completely broken. There was also a bar in the middle of the window that was bent, but it remained in place. There was also doubt as to if Hannah had actually been sprayed in the face with pepper spray, because she wasn't exhibiting any redness around her eyes or any irritation whatsoever when police got there. Investigators also could not detect pepper spray anywhere in the trailer. And then on top of all that, there was the fact that fingerprints and blood had been found on the back window of the trailer. And these fingerprints and blood led them to Hannah's girlfriend, Felicia Smith. Hannah had been interviewed 3 times after Levi's death, and each time she changed her story. She kept changing it so that she would look more credible after investigators had revealed more details in the case. She changed her story to make sure it fit the narrative. At one point, Hannah tried to claim that maybe Levi's father, Billy Ellerby Jr., was involved with Levi's death. But she soon dropped that after she realized that he had already spoken to police and he had an airtight alibi. Bummer. In addition to all these other things, Hannah had also been showing little to no emotion at the hospital the day that Levi died. Billy's mother would later describe her as being rather flat. Apparently, Levi's father had asked if Levi could be buried in an Ellerby family plot in Wynn Parish, and Hannah simply told him that he could do whatever he wanted with their son's body. No hesitation. And it was also noted by investigators that Hannah did not cry at the crime scene or when she was being interrogated by police. Friends, family, and acquaintances of Hannah would also hold judgment against her, saying that she didn't seem broken up enough after her son had died. But Billy's mother, Kathy, was trying to give the mother of her grandson the benefit of the doubt. She didn't think that there was any way Hannah could have been involved. But Kathy said that her whole family started to suspect Hannah more and more as more information came out. And as I had said, Felicia's fingerprints, as well as blood, had been found on the back window of the trailer. So 4 days after Levi had been found badly burned, on July 21st, 2018, Felicia was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The public had no idea who Felicia was or why she was arrested due to the gag order that was on the case. But it was soon revealed that Felicia and Hannah had a romantic and sexual relationship. In fact, they had both been seen around town with baby Levi. And the two had just broken up a few days before Levi's death. The thing is, a baby is a time commitment, so people were wondering if maybe Hannah got sick of that commitment, and that's what happened to Levi. Everyone would soon get answers as Felicia Smith started to confess to police what had happened to Levi on the night of July 17th. Felicia told the investigators that it had been Hannah's idea to kill baby Levi. But of course, Hannah denied any involvement in her son's death. Felicia went on to tell investigators that one day while working at IHOP, Hannah told Felicia that if she loved her, she would do anything for her, even if that meant going to jail. And after this cryptic statement, Hannah finally came out with it and asked Felicia if she would kill her son Levi. Felicia said that at first she refused, but for some unknown reason, she then decided that she would do it. On July 17th, Felicia had gone to Hannah's home, and there was a gun at the trailer. She decided that she was going to shoot Levi. But the gun jammed because somebody had put bullets in the gun backwards. Hannah then allegedly told her to burn little Levi until he was just bones, because that would get rid of the evidence. For whatever reason, Felicia decided that this was a good idea, and she took Levi out of the mobile home park. She then walked with him about a mile away, crossed the railroad tracks, and ended up on Breda Ave. In a wooded area between the tracks and a fence that runs behind a home, Felicia put down little Levi on the ground. She then doused him in gasoline and set his body on fire. And while poor little Levi was burning, Felicia acted like everything was just the same as normal and went in for her shift at IHOP. She arrived at work shortly before 10, which was about 20 minutes before Levi would be found badly burned. Felicia Smith was held without bond at the Richland Parish Jail until her trial. Hannah was arrested 4 days after Felicia was, on July 25th, and she was charged with being principal to a first-degree murder, as well as conspiracy to commit murder on a child younger than 12. Prosecutors would later upgrade Hannah's charge of principal to first-degree murder to just first-degree murder. So Hannah had reportedly told police that she was just using her ex-girlfriend, Felicia, for money and attention. She also said that Felicia was much more into the relationship than she had ever been. And Hannah's attorney was arguing that the only person with a motive was Felicia. He said that her motive was that she was angry because Hannah had just broken up with her recently. The defense lawyer also said that Felicia had claimed that Hannah was involved with Levi's murder. However, there was no physical evidence to back this up. He said the only reason that Felicia was implicating his client was so that she would get a better deal. So, did Felicia do this because she was angry about getting broken up with? Or was she jealous that Hannah still loved Levi and she was just making all this up? No. Hannah had everything to do with this. There were a few people who had heard Hannah recently saying how difficult it had been to be a single mother. And police had also spoken to a few people who called Hannah a compulsive liar, and a few people also said that they wouldn't have been surprised if she was involved with Levi's death. But as her lawyer had said, there was no physical evidence to say that Hannah had been involved with Levi's murder. But due to everything else that police had already heard, Hannah Barker was held in the Caddo Correctional Center, awaiting her trial. In July of 2021, Felicia, who was then 28 years old, entered into a plea to avoid a capital murder trial, which could have resulted in her receiving the death penalty. Instead, Felicia pleaded guilty to manslaughter, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and cruelty to a juvenile. And instead of the death penalty, she received 80 years in prison. And in this plea agreement, she had to testify against Hannah in court. And then in June of 2022, Hannah was supposed to go to trial, and she would also be facing the death penalty if she was found guilty. But just a few weeks prior to her trial, the prosecution had given her a deal. Since there was not enough physical evidence to tie Hannah to Levi's death, the district attorney was not convinced that Hannah would get convicted. She could potentially walk free. So in an attempt to make sure that she served time and was punished for Levi's death, a plea deal was put on the table. Levi's other family decided to accept this deal to make sure that Hannah got punished. And to everyone's relief, Hannah accepted that plea deal. She was not going to get off scot-free. She agreed to plead guilty under an Alford plea to a lesser charge of manslaughter, as well as conspiracy charges. She was sentenced to 10 years without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence for the manslaughter, and 30 years for conspiracy. An Alford plea means that she does not admit to the crime and still proclaims her innocence. So Hannah Barker, who is now 26, is serving her sentences concurrently. She is serving her time at the Louisiana Transition Center for Women in Tallulah, Louisiana. Hannah's attorney released a statement after she was sentenced, putting all the blame on Felicia. Levi's grandmother, Kathy Ellerby, would later mention that there was something Hannah had said to her that first day when Levi had gone missing and she was sitting in the back of the ambulance. Hannah had said to Kathy, "Nobody looked over there," and pointed in the direction of Breda Ave. To this day, Kathy says it haunts her all the time, wondering if she could have saved Levi. Kathy, along with the rest of Levi's family, know that Hannah is not innocent in this crime. Kathy says that while Felicia should have had enough common sense to know better than to murder Levi, she believes that she was very much coerced by Hannah. And unbelievably, at Felicia Smith's sentencing, Kathy told her that she forgave her. She said that she believed Felicia had told investigators the truth about the plan as well as the act of killing Levi. Kathy also believes that Felicia was just looking for someone to love and care for her, but ended up being a pawn to Hannah. Levi's family is in the process of building a playground at the church that his grandmother, Kathy Ellerby, attends, Old Union Church in Wynn Parish, to honor him. Levi's funeral was held on July 20th, 2018 at Southern Funeral Home. He was then buried in Old Union Cemetery in Joyce, Louisiana. And on August 4th, 2018, the community where Levi had once lived gathered to celebrate his short life. Local organizations held a balloon release and prayer vigil in downtown Natchitoches, Louisiana. The service was open to anyone who wanted to stop by to pay their respects. Organizers gave out orange ribbons in honor of Levi's favorite color, as well as balloons to those who didn't have one. Well, thank you for listening to all of Levi's story today. It's pretty obvious that Hannah had a hand in his death. But if her reasoning was to just get rid of him because being a single mother was too hard, then why didn't she ask his dad to take him, or his grandmother, or literally anybody, instead of killing him? He was a sweet and happy boy. There are so many people that would have taken care of and loved Levi. But I think that Kathy is right, and Felicia was just a pawn to Hannah. What do you think? So, if you do like true crime, and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. And turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is 2 to 3 times every week. Alright, until next time, thanks for watching A Wicked World. Take care, guys. Bye. Baby Sterling was born May 1st, 2017, to his parents Zachary Cohen and Cheyenne Harris. He was born rather unexpectedly at home in the bathtub. Now, Zachary and Cheyenne also had another child. They had a daughter named Nala. She was 2 years old at the time of Sterling's death. When Sterling was born, his mom Cheyenne, who was 20 at the time, and his dad Zachary, who was 28 at the time, both had substance abuse problems, mainly methamphetamine. They had been addicts for a few years at that point. Zachary claims that he mostly used it due to his job working him 70 to 80 hours a week. The 4 of them lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Alta Vista, Iowa. Due to Zachary's demanding work schedule, Cheyenne was the one to stay at home with the kids during the day, so she was their main caretaker. And this was kind of agreed upon between her and Zachary. He also had a very weak stomach and could not change diapers or do puke or anything like that. So it was more or less an agreement that she was the main caretaker and he would take care of things, I assume, if she couldn't handle them or if she wasn't available to. That's not how it ended up happening, however, but that's what I'm assuming the agreement was. With that in mind, as Zachary said that he had been working many hours that week, at the time the 911 call was made, he was at home. On August 30th, 2017, there was a 911 call placed by Zachary Cohen saying that his baby, Sterling, had died and he believed it was due to sudden infant death syndrome. This couldn't be any farther from the truth. However, this was yet to be discovered. In the 911 call, you can hear just how calm Zach is. I'm gonna go ahead and play that for you now.
Chickasaw County 911. This is Zach Cohen. Me and ambulance sent out here to my apartment. Okay, what's your address, Zach? 107 South Hilltop Avenue, Alta Vista. Okay, what's going on? Around 9, my girlfriend went to feed our son, and then about 11 or 11:30, she went to check on him, and he was gone. Gone meaning? He died. Okay. He got probably 4 months. I don't know if it was sudden death syndrome or what. Okay. So you live at 107 South Hilltop in Alta Vista? What, Apartment 7. Apartment 7? Okay, and your son's 4 months old? And the last time you checked on was 9? No, it was when she was trying at 9. Okay. And she was nervous. She was checking on her, nervous and crying or whatever. So probably about 11:30, 11:40, she went to check on me and she passed away. Okay, so that's the last time they checked on. Okay, what's your phone number there, Zach? 406-223-2190. Pretty sure last time she checked. She told me out. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll get them paged out, okay? I'm going to send an ambulance and everybody up there, okay? Okay, thanks. All right, thanks.
When the first responders first got to the apartment, Zachary led them back to the bedroom where Sterling was. They noted that it was very hot and very dark in the bedroom. They didn't even see a baby in there. They had no idea where he was. When Zachary led them over to where Sterling was, he was in a baby swing, facing away from the door on the opposite side of the room. The first thing that the first responders noticed was how bad it smelled. It reeked of urine and feces. Now, the bedroom that Sterling was in was actually right next to his parents' bedroom, where his older sister Nala also slept. So there was a very thin wall between the two rooms. The EMT, Tony Frederick, noted at the time that she got to the scene that Zachary showed very little to no emotion in regards to Sterling. And when EMT Tony Frederick went to lift up the blanket, a swarm of bugs came out from underneath the blanket that was covering baby Sterling in his swing. Sterling was stiff, cold, and severely underweight. He only weighed 7 pounds, which was very close to the amount that he weighed at the time of his birth. It looked like little Sterling had been dead for quite some time. Tony Frederick took a stand during Zach's trial, and she had a very difficult time giving her testimony. Given the state she had found Sterling in, it had severely affected her and her mental health.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
When Sterling's body was examined the next day on August 31st, 2017, it was discovered that he had been sitting in that same baby swing for at least 10 to 14 days. Sitting there, not moved, not changed, and most likely not fed either. His diaper was so filthy that maggots had started to grow, and he ultimately ended up dying of malnutrition, dehydration, and a terrible E. coli infection due to the diaper rash getting so bad and the feces making their way up into his body. His body was found to have maggots in various stages of development. The medical examiner was able to determine about how long it had been since this child had been bathed, fed, or changed. And he was able to figure this out due to how far along the maggot's growth and development was. And as I said, baby Sterling, they found out, had not been removed from that swing for over a week. A 4-month-old. He must have been crying. He must have been so hungry and so sick of sitting in his own filth. And their bedroom wall was right there next to his room. They had to have just ignored him. He probably got so weak after a while he couldn't even cry very loud, which is so sad. Zach ended up telling the police and the medics that Cheyenne had fed Sterling that morning at 9 a.m. And at that time, he says that Sterling was fine. Zachary said that when he went back in the room around 11 to check on Sterling again, that's when he wasn't breathing. This statement was clearly untrue and actually impossible given the state that Sterling was found in. He had to have been dead for much longer. He was lying about this, and as you'll see, many other things. Zach also told the detectives that he had just played with Sterling the day before, and that when he went into his room and started playing with him, Sterling reached out and grabbed his finger. They asked him, "You didn't notice the stink of the feces and urine in there? Because you told us you have such a sensitive stomach." Fair question. "No," he says, "he didn't smell it." Well, that smell didn't get there within one day. Also, a doctor later testified that that would have been impossible for Sterling to have grabbed his finger the day before, given the weak and frail state that he was found in the following day. Zach later took back the statement that he went into Sterling's room the day prior and said he must have mixed up his days and it must have been a few days earlier than that. He got confused because of all the hours that he was working at his job, which, now that we're talking about it, that proved to be false as well. When the investigators looked at Zach's time cards from work, it indicated that he had only worked approximately 25 hours the week before Sterling's death. So he was there to take care of Sterling had Cheyenne been incapable of taking care of Sterling at the time. But he didn't. So what was Cheyenne's excuse for baby Sterling's death? Well, since she had been on drugs prior, she said that that week she had been withdrawing and she wasn't able to properly care for him. However, her daughter, Nala, was perfectly taken care of. So that argument kind of goes out the window pretty quickly. And Zach is saying that he didn't know that there was anything wrong with Sterling. If he had, he would have taken care of him. Well, where were you, Zach? Because you were home for a lot of the time last week. You didn't go into his room once? Not once, huh? The week leading up to Sterling's death, Cheyenne wasn't capable of taking care of him due to her withdrawals. However, she was capable of posting on Facebook and Instagram, watching TV on the couch, going to the supermarket, getting up and making herself meals out of the fridge, along with other activities. But she couldn't go into Sterling's room and give him a bottle or change his diaper or give him some love and snuggles. She couldn't do any of that for some reason. Jordan Clark, who was a former friend of Zach's and also worked with him, said that he wasn't even aware that Zach had a new baby. He had been over there multiple times. He had never heard or seen Sterling. Didn't know this child even existed. How is that possible with a newborn? Amanda Reynolds, who had known Zach for the last 10 years, told reporters that Zach was a nice and mellow guy, and he came from a good family. However, that was before his substance abuse. When she heard about Sterling's death, knowing that he was an active addict, she just knew that it was somehow Zach's fault. Amanda also said that when she spoke to Zach soon after Sterling's birth, Zach had concerns about whether he was truly Sterling's biological father or not. Could this have been the motive? Possibly. We do see this very often in true crime cases. Zach's old friend Amanda also says how badly it hurt her inside after Sterling died, seeing that his parents were still active on Facebook and barely touched on the subject of Sterling's death, yet were still posting memes and pictures and statuses of going out to dinner, yet asking for everybody's sympathy as well. During the period between the time of Sterling's death in August and up until October 24th, Zach was a free man, and so was Cheyenne. On October 3rd, Zach actually posted a photo saying that the couple was loving the clean life. "We have joined you," one person commented. "We're proud of you guys. It really is so much better. Hard to stay awake at times, but we get past it," Zach replied. The couple also showed off new tattoos less than 2 months after Sterling had died. Real nice. Real nice. They weren't even in memoriam of Sterling. Another thing that Zach posted was this photo captioned, "The dark is afraid of me," on September 24th, less than a month after Sterling had died. On October 1st, he published a meme on his page with a photo of pit bulls captioned, "To some, I'll always be the bad guy." Someone replied to this post, "You are a bad guy. Who does this to a beautiful baby? And to think you had another one in that house the whole time. Do you get what trauma you put your baby daughter through? And all the while, your son was dead in his baby swing? You sick, twisted fuck." Also, on September 21st, he spoke about how upset he was that his daughter had been taken away from the couple. It didn't look like either one of them showed any remorse for Sterling's death. And they were both very clearly to blame. They were both arrested a few months after Sterling's death. I think they should have been arrested immediately, looking at Sterling's condition. He was severely underweight. He was sitting in filth so bad that there was flies in it. And his body was cold when his parents said that he was just fine a few hours ago. That is so suspicious right there. I don't know how it took them so long, honestly, but when they were finally sent to trial, Zach tried to pin this all on Cheyenne by saying that he trusted the wrong person. He trusted the wrong person to take care of his kids. He didn't admit to the fact that he had also been there for much of the time. He made it seem like he was barely at the house at all. They both got sentenced anyways. Cheyenne was convicted of first-degree murder and child endangerment in February of 2019. It took until November of the same year for Zach to be charged, and he was charged with the exact same crimes as Cheyenne was. They were both sentenced to life in prison, which I think is what they deserve. I'm glad neither one of them will ever be getting out. Cheyenne, however, has had an interview behind prison walls, and to this day, she still blames the drugs and seems to show no remorse for baby Sterling.